Hi everyone, this is Mr. Frykowski, and today we're going to be looking at elections and money. Undoubtedly, they have a role in the election process. That's something that has always been a major issue, especially in the past 50 to 60 years. Really, the first attempt to curb the influence of money in campaigns was FECA, the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1974. And what this did was it essentially created an agency known as the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, which is still in existence today, which administers the campaign finance laws that are set for federal elections. Notice it is federal elections, not states. In addition, it also created the Presidential Election Campaign Fund. So when you file taxes, it will ask you, do you want to contribute $3 on your income tax return? And then all of that goes into a campaign fund for just presidential candidates. Now, currently, 11% of taxpayers actually contribute those $3. Now, when candidates are running, if they agree to accept public financing, then there are limits to how much they're allowed to spend on a campaign. Now, most presidential candidates do not do this because they can outraise whatever the presidential campaign fund would provide them. So, for example, President Obama in 2008 sort of took some heat in saying that he didn't want to because he could raise a ton of money, more than, let's say, the 70 million that the campaign fund could provide him. Let's face it, elections are expensive, especially presidential elections. So again, presidential elections can be publicly and privately financed. Now, with respect to public financing during the primaries, they do provide matching funds. Contributions of up to $250 are matched for candidates who meet certain conditions, such as limiting spending, as I just mentioned earlier. And then when you get to the general election, you'll be provided with more financing as well. But some of the conditions, you have to provide full disclosure of who's campaigning. There are limited contributions in terms of hard money. Hard money is money directly given to a candidate, as opposed to soft money, which is indirect and would go through, let's say, to a political action committee. And here you see with the Presidential Election Campaign Fund, the election campaign, where you can check off whether or not you want to contribute $3. So keep, heads up if you want to do that when you file your tax returns. Now, a very important Supreme Court case that comes about is Buckley versus Valeo in 1976, and essentially what the Supreme Court says is that the government cannot provide caps, cannot set laws or spending limits on one's own campaign, because that would violate free speech. So again, you can spend as much money as you want on your own campaign, and Ross Perot did this when he spent $60 million on his own campaign. So again, Buckley v. Valeo, you can spend as much money as you want on your own campaign. Now, what comes about are known as political action committees out of FECA. It's an unintentional consequence of this. Now, labor unions and corporations are prohibited under the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947. But since you have PACs that will be created, these are essentially the arms of labor unions and corporations. It's like a middleman, if you will, and they donate to political parties. So under FECA, it essentially limits the amount of money that can be given to a candidate committee per election, as well as to a national party committee or to other PACs. And they've been around since about 1944, but certainly they've sprung up since the 1970s. And they use soft money. Again, this is money not given directly to a candidate. So if you were to donate money to a PAC, that's soft money. And in return, that money might be going to sending out campaign literature. It might go out toward advertisement in newspapers or, let's say, on television. So essentially, the use of the media is going to be utilized to skirt FECA. Now, another campaign law that comes about in 2002 is the McCain-Feingold Act, which banned soft money, increased the amount of individual contributions to 2000, and limited issue ads. The McCain-Feingold Act is also known as the BCRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, as McCain is a Republican and Feingold is a Democrat from California. And essentially this will ban PACs, corporations, from running ads 30 days before an election and 60 days before a primary. So you're limiting the extent and the reach of PACs toward influencing elections and primaries. In addition, it also mandates that names and contributions must be disclosed for the sake of transparency. But the proliferation of PACs is evident from these statistics. From as of 2006, and I would imagine that this number has already grown, over 4,200 PACs given over $372 million to congressional candidates. We're not even talking about the presidential candidates. One of the major criticisms of PACs is that they buy candidates. And again, one could seriously make that argument to a certain extent. Now, PACs do have the limitations to how much they can give in terms of hard money, but it's really the soft money that's the issue. And we're going to be looking at a Supreme Court case about that relatively soon. So if you look here at some of the big spending PACs, the National Association of Realtors, $3.7 million, 52% given to Republicans. But you'll notice some of these are very heavily skewed towards Republicans and the others not so much, some right down the middle. But typically labor unions are much less because Democrats tend to favor big labor, whereas businesses tend to support Republicans. So there you go with that. Here's the National Rifle Association, the NRA, 85% of that money given to Republicans. No surprise there. Now, two important cases, Citizens United versus the FEC and SpeechNow.org versus the FEC. Essentially, it still holds up that corporations and unions can't donate money directly to campaigns, but it does say that political spending is a form of protected speech under the First Amendment. So what it says is the government cannot prohibit corporations or unions from spending money to support or denounce candidates. And essentially what this leads to is super PACs. These are also known as officially independent expenditure-only committees. So they can raise as much money as they want from corporations, unions, and individuals, and they can advocate openly for or against political candidates. Now, of course, the big thing here is that they are prohibited from donating or coordinating directly with political candidates. But as we've seen from the Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, who formed his own super PAC and then was running as a presidential candidate, handed it off to Jon Stewart, and easily they could be coordinating with one another. So again, this opens up a lot more for spending, which is the major criticism here. And some people automatically say, well, this is going to favor Republicans, but also think about unions. This allows unions to donate unlimited sums of money to campaigns. So this would have favored Democrats as well. So it allows just for a lot more money to get, become involved. And then this begs the question, are campaigns too expensive? Fundraising takes lots of time. Incumbents do worse when they spend more money because they need to spend to defeat quality challengers. So again, that's escalating the cost. And then just look at presidential campaigns. If you compare them to Europe, they're much, much longer in the United States compared to Europe. So again, money has been a constant theme here in elections and politics in the United States, and it's a major criticism that how democratic is it if that you have more money, you're going to be able to reach candidates more, influence policy. So does that give you a bigger advantage compared to the average Joe? And that is, of course, a legitimate question and one that's going to continue to be debated. All right, thank you.